Welcome to the next big thing, the 2469 Community Podcast. Joining us today, we have Olga Nayda, co-founder and CEO of Gloc.al, Darshan Thakkar, CFO of AHOY, Zohare Haider, co-founder and CEO of Jalebi.io, and Karim Beidas, founder and CEO of Kidzapp.
Yes.
والله والله كيف حالك شو اخبارك يا حبيبي
Do you want us to talk
يا
louder?
شباب.
I know only one phrase in Arabic is دجاج بارد.
I don't know what that means.
Even I don't know
Cold
what that
chicken.
means.
Cold chicken.
Of
Yeah,
course.
this is
Do you
what,
like cold chicken?
I don't know.
Because I like cold chicken in the afternoon.
Oh, it's like a cold borscht on the next day.
It's like a cold pizza then, probably.
Yeah.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is my wife's hack. She figured this out because I saw her one day. She was eating what we had for dinner the other night, and then she's putting a plate together in the afternoon, but she didn't put it in the microwave. I was like, "You're gonna eat that cold?" And she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Why?" She's like, "This is how I stay awake." I'm like, "What do you mean?" So she explained to me, and then I did some research. As it turns out, your metabolism actually has to work much harder to process and break down cold food in the afternoon. So it makes your entire body alert.
Actually, you know what? It makes sense because what I do usually, if I'm feeling sleepy after lunch, I actually go for a quick cryotherapy session.
There you go.
So I just dip
Chill out.
myself in,
that
minus 100
definitely
degrees.
wakes you up.
So
Ice
that
bucket?
really wakes me up. So
That's
actually
it,
that
because
makes
your
sense
body,
now.
you know, all the electricity starts firing.
Yeah. You start fighting for survival.
Basically, yeah.
Exactly. So,
Have you guys done ice bucket challenges?
of course,
Yeah?
I've done ice bucket. I do ice bucket quite regularly,
Not
actually.
challenges, the one where you go in.
Yeah.
right?
I
Yeah,
just
I've
dip
done that,
myself
yeah.
in it.
I did that for you.
I do that once a week. I actually fill up my own ice bucket, my old tub with ice, and actually do it every week.
Where'd you get the ice from?
I order ice from Insta Shop.
Oh, wow.
And you find it's helpful?
Very,
Yeah.
extremely helpful. Really, really helpful.
So I did it once, just before I traveled to London a few weeks ago. And for the rest of the day, I felt really clear and energized, but I don't know how long that lasted.
If you do it regularly, you actually start seeing the effects of it very nicely over a period of few days, actually. So I have a membership and I do that once in every 3 days. Just go there for 3 minutes, stand in the cryo chamber, and I really feel good.
The trick is, though, you got to do the hot and cold, right? So there's these places where you have the sauna for 40 minutes, and then you go into the tub for 15 minutes, and then you go back in the sauna. So you do that 3-4 times. The whole idea is to actually eject toxins from your body. And so you're basically taking yourself into your body's capable of doing a lot. We're just spoiled because we live in places like Dubai, but real life was much different few hundred years ago, right?
Yeah. But
So
I
the
feel-
human body is capable of a lot.
I feel very similar thing when I go outside of the office and come back to the office.
But that's different, though.
Going
The
to
AC
the
is different.
sauna. Yeah, then I come in and I'm already wet and I'm start
Yeah.
to cool.
That'll make you sick.
Stress yourself out for a few minutes so that when the stress goes away, you feel really good. I like that approach.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is all sort of coping mechanisms for the stress that we have. So everybody has a different way of sort of
Stress?
navigating
What stress? I thought this is how we are.
That's a perpetual state of motion sort of a thing, You don't know you're moving because you're always moving. So that's a perpetual state.
In the northern countries, very popular when you go to the banya or sauna and then jumps into the snow or ice
Same.
lake.
Yeah.
So it works also. It's kind of old style mechanism to make you run and not to get sick during the winter.
Yeah.
So it's very, very helpful. But I think for entrepreneurs, it's a really good thing because what I'm seeing everywhere, sometimes startup founders or just business people who's running and running and running, they need to switch off and start again. And that sounds like a good tool just to figure out how it works and use it day to day. On your experience, I understood that it works perfectly, right?
For me, the challenge is as a founder, as you said, we need to switch off and start again, but we don't have a lot of time to do that. We have to switch off and switch on again in a matter of few hours sometimes. So doing something like this, understanding what you need as a human body as well as your brain, that really helps you crack the code because, we don't have much time in between. We just have to be on the go. But at the same time, we have to be conscious of how we are managing our workload because end of the day, this journey is not a sprint. It's actually a marathon. But at the same time, we need to be conscious of the time. So how do we balance these two? And this is how the question comes. Right?
But what do you think it means to switch off?
Switch off as in you really, you just sort of you're not in the perpetual state of motion that we always are. You really take some time to reflect back on what has happened. Zoom in, zoom out, basically. This is one of the key concepts I keep on telling myself, that you need to zoom in into what you're doing, and then at some stage zoom out as well to understand what have you done. Do we need to change course? Do we need to be more agile? So this is what I believe in, switching off, zooming in and zooming out.
So you don't think switching off means watching a movie, for example? You think it means taking a different look at your business?
Actually, it can mean watching a movie, because I believe that subconsciously we're anyway thinking of our own issues. So switching off can be different for different kind of people, right? It depends on a personal preference. This is what I believe in.
Yeah, that's actually
Sounds
very,
like a
very
single
true.
man.
Single entrepreneur, not just a single man, a single entrepreneur.
But that's a very interesting question. And I love, Olga, how you like sort of literally just took that and segued right into the contrasting life of an entrepreneur. And it's very interesting because I spent 15 years in corporate, and the idea of having to start from scratch with something felt so frustrating. It was like, oh my God. But you felt like you were working towards something because there was a promotion or a raise or some kind of accolade that was waiting for you. As an entrepreneur, the only accolade is that you got the job done, right? And no one's going to give it to you except for yourself. There's no like shield waiting for you every 3 months saying, best performer of the year.
Yeah.
That's just a mental state we kind of, like placebos. But I mean, to your point, I think that switching off is, for me, it's a fundamentally different thing. And I've realized this a couple of times in my life. There was this one moment where I literally reached, I sort of crossed over as my dad used to say, you crossed the Rubicon. It's like when you've broken the sort of the barrier of whatever there is. I basically just kind of deleted my entire digital profile, deleted my WhatsApp, my Instagram, Facebook, everything. I just basically went offline. And immediately I got phone calls. Like as it happened, and I was about to catch a flight with my family, it was melting, right? And a couple of my friends and advisors called me because I left a bunch of groups all at the same time. So they were like, "This is weird, right? Has he died?
It's quite alarming, right?
It's shocking, and there was no warning."
Yeah.
And so I took that. That was an extreme way to do it because I needed a big reset. But more recently, literally like 2 weeks ago, I went with my family for a trip to Zanzibar. Like just, I needed to, of course, but summer break and everything. But that was just good timing. But the last 6 months have been very stressful as a founder. But I needed that, and it was a complete disconnect. Very bad internet, so I was offline. Phone was away from me. I had no idea what was happening at work, which was fine because I have great co-founders who are running stuff. But I was in the present. I was doing things with my son, with my wife, with my toes in the water, whatever, right? I was there at that moment as it was happening. I wasn't thinking about what happened before, and I wasn't thinking about what was going to happen after. Just there. And I think for me, that was like.
So if you have to just really take a step back, everybody here is an entrepreneur, and we are actually doing something. We are actually here to change the world. At least we are doing our own attempt. So. At some stage, this kind
I just
of
want to change my bank balance, man.
That's an outcome, right? But in the end, some of these times of switching off actually helps us understand why are we doing this. So personally, how I cope is that I actually take some of these mini switch offs where I go back and reflect, why am I really doing this? Am I doing it for the right reason? What is actually making me tick? Because as somebody who is into a startup journey, as you said, we don't even know what's going to happen in the next 3 months. We probably don't even have a paycheck for this month at some stage. So all we are doing right at any given point are just taking a step in the right direction, or sometimes even not that. So all we need to see is that, have we taken a right step in the right direction towards a bigger goal, or we need to change our course. And this is one of the reasons I actually switch off every once in a while to reflect on that.
Oh, I think it's kind of skill that
Yes.
we may gain, because otherwise you're just diving deeper in the processes and you just can't flow up. You're diving deeper and deeper, and you need somebody to hook you and bring you on the top. But
rabbit holes.
Yeah, I really like what you said. I was at the present moment, and I feel myself at that moment sometimes as I was in a child. Because when you were children, you feel everything right now, right here. And what I found, the only thing that can bring me that is when I do snowboarding, and I
nice.
fell down. And as soon as I fell down, I feel that smash.
It's like a break point.
Yeah, and maybe even my bones make some crack sound. And I'm like, oh no, hope my back is not broken. And I'm like, and when I'm standing up and I understand that everything is okay, and I'm like, this is the life that's happening. But before that, before I fall, I was writing and thinking, oh, I will come back home. What will be there? What I should answer on that message. I need to push that person. Oh, what about that sale? But as soon as you fell down, you felt that crack, you felt that, pressure of the snow on your body, you understood like, oh no, life is happening here, right now at the moment. And to bring you at that, what happening here is, I think, the most valuable skill without falling exactly.
Yeah.
So what I think the way to apply that is all the time, if you can. Obviously, we all know about mindfulness. We've all read the books or seen the Instagrams or watched the podcasts, right?
Or the apps as well.
Or the apps. So I'm not going to say much about mindfulness or anything like that, but it's applying it is a completely different thing, especially when you're under the pressure that you are as an entrepreneur. So, for example, like even in the office at work, I think most people, the stress they feel, if it really comes from themselves. I've seen that, with my wife at work, I'm sure you've seen that even with your own team members, partners, employees, or previously your boss. It's really all about what the work means to you and what it feels to you. And that's what gives you the stress. And then, so when you take that as a startup, as a founder, it's even more than that, because it's not just the work. The whole company is what reflects on you. It's all about why. It's an extension, why you started and everything. So for me, and I think, I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, it's really a journey of the self.
Yep.
And if you have partners, it's probably a different kind of self. I mean, you have support, but you also have this, how do I interact with other people under our company, right? So,
I mean, you brought up this very good thing about mindfulness. Now, before we actually apply some of these principles of mindfulness, you need to understand what's the meaning of mindfulness for every individual, because everybody has a different understanding of mindfulness. Understanding what makes you tick, understanding what makes you actually be mindful, be conscious. Everybody has different tools. Some people have good friends. Some people are easily able to share it with other people. So that becomes one of their ways of coping. Some people actually are not. They're probably introverts, and they need some other tools to sort of start becoming mindful. So it all depends on every individual, right?
Some people need a Burning Man.
Exactly. Some people need psychedelics to actually really go within themselves, as you said, to understand what is actually going on and how do you be mindful, how do you have the right tools. So there are a lot of ways. The issue is that right now everybody has a very standard application of mindfulness, but what I believe is that everybody has their own journey. Everybody uses different tools, and once you actually figure out the right set of tools, you can actually be very mindful after that. So, and this is what I've learned personally, because I went through a series of tools. Most of them did not work for me, including therapy, friends, support group, whatever you call it. But it works for other people. It doesn't work for me. So I actually had to adopt and create a set of tools that work for me in order to help me with this journey.
So we're saying now, because mindfulness is more about switching on almost than switching off.
I think mindfulness is about being conscious of what you're doing, and then making a decision whether you want to keep being switched on or actually switch off. So I think it's about being conscious. This is what I feel.
So what I want to say, because it's interesting what you were saying, like the moments that really, what you were saying was switching off, was about being really present and feeling everything around you, which is mindfulness, which is actually being switched on and conscious, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what really gets you back to yourself and really gets people to kind of release. And I think this is in everything, and I don't think it's different for entrepreneurs. I think with entrepreneurs, you're just up against your own walls all the time, that it puts you there. So the question is, how can you apply this also? And we're all looking for that in the work you're doing in the startup, not just actually to your team, but also to yourself every day. Because where does the stress come from, right? Does the stress come from not knowing if you're going to be able to pay your salaries? Or is it worrying what people will think if your business fails, or if you don't succeed, or if a competitor does something? Or is it being out on the streets? What is it? And then how do you cope with that?
I mean, let's look at it in two contexts. One, as your own journey, and at the same time, where we are. Now, in this part of the world, success is more standard. They have a standard definition of success, which is having a stable job, having a good degree, and just working a job to actually make yourself secure, right?
Yeah.
Now we come in, and entrepreneurship is sort of relatively new to this region, and there is a lot of pressure from the society and people asking, "What are you doing? Why not a standard job?" So actually, this also contributes to stress because you're always wary of people sort of judging you directly or indirectly when you actually say what you're doing. So starting from there all the way to availability of the right tools, the right ecosystem for entrepreneurs, because it's not just about customers and funding, it's actually about the whole ecosystem. So these external factors plus your own internal journey plus the people that you work with in your startup, all of these contribute to the level of stress that you have as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that more valuable is how your backup office reacting on that. Backup office, I'm saying your family that exactly should support you. What I've seen and like what I faced personally is when your relatives don't understand what you are doing and pushing you and saying like when you will find a job, what in case of your successful friend that already bought an apartment being on a regular job, when you will find a job and so on, it downgrading your mood and your efforts really strong.
Are our relatives going to be watching this before we...
I hope so.
I hope so. I mean,
Okay, then.
no, I mean, so it actually is a very valid point. So actually what we can do is we can just go around and see what kind of tools sort of are being used to just be mindful and be conscious. I don't know. I mean,
maybe it's not a tools. Maybe it's a skills. So because tool is something that
outside you.
Yeah. There's something that you're using and you're relying, like you're putting your success on that tool. And if that tool is bad, then you need to change another tool. But the thing is exactly, it's like, how do you react on that? What is your resistance to what's happening? And what I found that, and I saw many entrepreneurs who was starting without having any experience before, and then they gained facing with new efforts, with the new difficulties, they become bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like a risk resistance. So first time, this very small risk was putting them in a like crucial situation. There was almost crying, going crazy. But after the year, the same entrepreneur was like, "Oh, just nothing for me." So this
Do you have actual examples that you can remember where this happened? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, sure. For example, my co-founder, first time when he faced with the issues with the client, when he was like asking some particular questions about like what's happening, like that was a thing that the client was not able to accept the work that been done because they was changing their marketing managers every 1 month, and we were not able to pass that job. And my co-founder, he didn't face with that service or agent work before, and he thought that this is the problem inside of our company, till we understood that it is not. Because if customer cannot accept the job because there is no responsible person at the end, and if you don't know that that type of process can be happened, you will never accept that. You're afraid of something that you never faced before. But as soon as he understood that that can happen, that you can protect yourself in the contract, it stopped to be for him something, critical.
But that's, for me, that's really... By the way, before I get on to this, what's with marketing managers? Is that just a UAE thing?
I don't know. I'm a marketing guy.
I think it's fair to say it's more of a regional thing, genuinely.
Are you talking about the turnover?
You turnover, finding the right one that actually knows marketing and is an expert in it and is affordable.
Everyone's an expert until they get the job.
Apparently,
Yeah,
everybody's
exactly.
an
Especially
expert.
digital marketing or digital
I can
ads.
say that with authority because
I mean, you're an expert, right, in that area,
well,
Zohare,
no.
right?
I don't know if I'm an expert, but I've done it a long time.
But having said that, I mean, I want to hear about your expertise. Are you looking for work, by the way?
I ran
We
my
pay
own
really
agency for-
little. You work ridiculous hours, and your boss gets stressed out at you a lot. Do you want to?
Can I do it on the side while I'm building the other company? Sure.
It's good for mindfulness
I
practice.
could grease the
Of
wheels.
course
Right?
it is
I'll
good.
do the work.
But what you're saying is he learned how to protect himself.
Yeah.
I don't feel that's the same as being able to accept risk in a bigger way. I agree with you that entrepreneurs can accept risk in a bigger way. I think that pretty much any startup founder in the first I think in the very beginning, when you have a bit of cash and it's just you and one or two other people in this together, salaries are not a scary thing. I think it starts coming when you actually have a team, you're paying salaries, the income hasn't properly
Families are depending on you.
Families depending on you. That's where the salary stress comes in. And I can bet you that is by end of year 1 or middle of year 2, every startup founder, that's their biggest stress. And I can guarantee you that by year 3 or 4 or 5, they have the exact same problems on a much bigger
Larger
scale with more people, and somehow they're still able to sleep. So how do they do that?
I think, one thing that works for me, because we've been through similar situations before, I ask myself the question, what is the worst that can happen? So that actually is an internal mechanism where I start thinking of scenarios. And then once I accept the worst scenario from any of these questions, I accept that and I move on with it. So basically, internally, I've already made peace or reconciled that if the worst scenario comes through, I'm okay with that. And that makes me much more free to actually take any actions without being impacted by the situation currently, which sometimes, in an emotional state, an entrepreneur can make wrong decisions. So one of the ways I do that is actually accepting the worst scenario in my head and then moving on very rationally.
Have you ever gone?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what's the reality? Have you ever faced the worst case scenario? Yes. Or what is the worst case scenario they face? Like, outside of the hypotheticals, because I think the practical application of the scenario is actually being in it, right? And then the anxiety that comes with that.
I mean, so many scenarios. You talk about not understanding how the product is going to look like, not understanding how you're going to...
Again, that's a hypothetical. I mean, shit hit the fan.
Have you been in the worst case scenario and got out of it?
Several times, because this is not my first startup. I had a couple of startups before as well. And the last startup that I had before my current one was actually during COVID. And we had a team of around 8 people. Overnight work shut down. And this is where we had to make a decision. How do we continue? What do we do with this? And at that time, we were barely able to make salaries, not even a month's runway, for example. And we had to make a call. So this kind of thinking came in quite handy at that time, where I actually realized that, okay, this is the worst that can happen. Now, this is the situation. And if it's going to happen, I'm okay to move with that. And that actually helped me make decision and communicate decision as well very clearly to the team. So yes, it has happened in real life quite a few times.
What did you guys do though? How did you handle it?
We continued for around 6 months.
Okay.
After that, we actually got a couple of engagements, even though it was COVID. And thankfully that was in UAE. So we were able to deliver the work. And then after that, the running just became difficult. So we had to shut down. But we were able to pay off the salaries and then wrap up the company.
Tough choice. We had a similar situation as well. So my wife and I ran a digital agency for like 7 years. Started in 2015. So I was moonlighting. I was working a job at a very big global organization, a lot of travel, very demanding job. But we started the agency on the side, became a full-time thing a few years later. And then when COVID happened, literally 80% of our revenues were out of the window. Clients were flying away. Anyone we had couldn't pay you. All the same thing millions of people faced. And the first thing that we did obviously was, founders took a massive haircut, essentially just zero. And then we engaged the team and got them on board. I think at that time we were like peak staff was like maybe 20, 25 people or something. We're running a couple of country operations. And we brought them on board, told them this is what's happening. And the funny thing is that, companies survived, fortunately, even though there were many moments we were thinking, probably shut it down. But we survived, and it was because we managed to win a couple of accounts during COVID, and it just kind of rode us through. But I think the most valuable thing that we got out of that was we saw the danger coming before it actually came, and we were able to engage our team early on and give them a very real scenario of what's actually happening and how that's going to affect us, and giving them the choice that, look, this is a moment where you could potentially walk away, cash out, or whatever, get your paycheck, take a 3-month sort of a notice period. Or if you're willing to go through the grindstone with us, then, we don't know how this is going to turn out, but we'll go through it together. And if it works out, then, hurrah for us, right? Fortunately, we were able to make through it, but I think the best of the team ended up burning out, and they had to leave eventually over the course of the next year, which was natural, and it was a good departure. New people came in, and the company changed. Eventually, my wife and I both stepped away from it as well, and it's running independently, which is for me miraculous. Like, we survived all of that, and now I don't even have to spend more than 5 minutes of my time a month, and it still brings home the bacon, so to speak. Strange.
Sorry.
Yeah, I thought, may we say that having that skill of telling upfront that something bad is happening is better than to hide and waiting that maybe it won't be so bad. So what I see, some teams, they not saying to their employees that something went bad, and at the end it goes worse. And when it's highlighting, you understood that you as employee will not get your salary, not because there was bad your work, because COVID happened, something happened, and company was not able to cover that risk. So what do you think?
You'll notice this more commonly with companies where they have either shareholders or they're listed companies, because it's a huge factor of perception, and perception drives the value of the company. So larger companies like the Facebooks and the Metas of the world, the Metas and the Googles of the world, where you'll suddenly hear about layoffs, or you'll hear about McKinsey's and Accenture's, where suddenly access was locked out completely, right? Because they have a fiscal responsibility to their shareholders, which unfortunately does not pass on to the employees. And so it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. I think it's terrible, but companies that are typically more I forget this one company, there's a fintech company in the States, very popular. The founder, during COVID, famously on LinkedIn, has got long hair. He looks like a messiah. I don't remember his name.
I know
a
what
famous
you're talking
fintech
about,
company. Yeah. He not only took a massive haircut on his salary, but he actually increased people's salaries as they got deeper into COVID. And he raised the minimum wage at his company. And it was incredible to see at a time when there were massive, massive layoffs happening. This guy's basically doubling down on his team. That's not the sexy thing to do, unfortunately, but that's the right thing to do, and it's hard to do.
The reality is they had the funds to do that.
That's the thing,
so
right?
That's also, that's you're not going to find an airline doing that. But
no way.
But I want to go.
Emirates was apparently very good, by the way. So, shout out to them. They did some amazing things. I have some friends who work there as well. And I heard they were doing incredible things to help keep the staff on as long as they could, right? For whatever.
Yeah. But again, this all is a matter of perception. Going back to your original point, as a founder, you have to sort of delineate between the startup and the founder, right? Because founder has to make some tough decisions which maybe nobody else has to make. So how much do you pass on to your team? How much pressure you pass on to your team? When do you press the panic button? Is it too early or too late? It cannot be too early as well, because you don't want people having this worry in the back of their mind. So it has to be the right balance, right? It cannot be like you're sharing everything with your team, because that will unnecessarily create chaos, which you probably want to avoid. So what is the right time?
I think it's a degree as well, right? There are extremes and where a lot of people completely hold back on everything, and then suddenly, like a big bad news.
It's like a waterfall of bad news, and people may just
and there's no time for them to recover. But the thing is that they will, they'll overcome. The assumption is what was that guy, that company in India where that guy did that massive layoff on Zoom, and there was massive he got the whole internet trolled on him, right? Of course.
I heard that story.
And then he got fired as well by the board or whatever.
But
there's a lot of cases like that.
But the thing is, again, as a founder, the idea is that nobody is able to empathize with these sort of decisions that a founder has to make for his or her startup. So the founder has to be, again, having the set of right tools in order to be mindful and conscious. We were talking about mindfulness. So this is where this comes into play, where what decision do you make? What is the timing of the decision? All of these are things that need to be decided by the founder or the founding team, for that matter. How do you make that? Everybody has a different set of, I would say, criteria to go through, because you all admit that you will be thinking of your own startup at any given point of time. You're not stopping to think. Nobody stops thinking about it, subconsciously or consciously, right?
5 to 7, I'm offline, man. I know what you mean. Yes. It's hard to switch off. It's very
hard to switch off. So,
but the discipline is really important. Honestly, I think if there's one thing that I've kind of taken away from whatever journeys I've had, is that you need to set your own boundaries, and those boundaries are very critical for you to create and be consistent with. Because if you don't do that, then it interferes with other things that should matter to you, but end up getting diluted in the noise of what you're trying to do. Like, I mean, family life, personal life, like I've got a kid, I've got a dog, I've got cats, wife, and all of these sort of elements that all expect attention from me, and I am obligated to give them, but I need to want to do that as well. But at the same time, like setting those boundaries gives me this peripheral vision on like, okay, this is like, I believe if you can demarcate like a good 6 hour day and get everything that you need to get done during that time, you are able to really prioritize yourself in a way that makes you still good enough to go for the next couple of hours to hang out with your kid or friends or whatever it is, right?
But it's more than that, right? It's not just hanging out with them. It's hanging out with them.
Being present.
And being
Being present, like offline from other stuff.
But I'm
right?
seeing a
Not
theme
distracted.
coming back here, and it all goes down to stress as well, right? You need to be able to do that to de-stress.
Stress accumulates, and you need to.
But then there's two approaches that I know of that I apply myself, and I think if I'd be interested to hear if you guys do, right? Which is, and I'm sure there's a third one in the middle, which is also a healthy approach, which I'd love to learn. But there's the ostrich approach, and there's the faith approach, which I think entrepreneurs have both plentiful, right? Like, for example, like you can have the ostrich, which is no. I'm not seeing these numbers. We're going to be fine. Right? And sometimes
it's like that dog gif with.
And sometimes I've had that.
Yes, you're fine.
And then when I wake up, it's like, okay, no. Now it's time to really look at the numbers. And when you do, you find out you can actually do things about it. And then there's the faith-based approach, which you're not really putting your head in the sand, but you just somehow believe that things are going to work out. And they do. Like, for example, when you got these clients at the end of COVID that pulled you through it, or et cetera, I think we've all experienced this. And I think this is something there in the entrepreneur's world, right? The ostrich, and then the faith that I don't know what's going to happen, but I just believe that it's going to happen.
What
right?
I do, personally for me, I actually don't live in the balance. I don't enjoy living in the balance. So my theory goes more towards obsession. So if it has to be obsession about work, or obsession about switching off, actually live at those boundaries. So for me, the work-life balance as a concept is redundant. I actually don't believe in that concept. I feel everything has to be at imbalance. When you're really working, you need to be obsessed about work. You really need to be obsessed about cracking the problem, any problem that you have. And when you're really switching off, you need to be obsessed about being properly switched off. And this is what I believe in. For me, again, work-life balance is just a fad. I don't believe in work-life balance because anything that we do as founders need to be imbalanced. I mean, we are literally going against the tide, and that's why the balance is not something that we can maintain. This is my own personal theory.
What do you think about all the memes about bootstrapped startup founders and VC-backed startup founders? So looks like I'm not VC backed yet. Looks like that according to memes, life of VC backed guys much easier. I don't know why, but everybody's creating memes about that. That soldiers.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there's any difference because a startup, VC backed or not, is just a very individual journey. You're moving towards success. Doesn't matter who is backing you.
Well, it helps to have a big paycheck and
I don't know, man.
and funds in the bank.
I really disagree with you there.
I mean, again, for me, I just look at it very individually. It doesn't matter who is backing me.
Yeah.
I'm just oriented towards getting the best value out of what I have in mind. And it has to be that way. So I personally don't see a difference in anybody backing me or not.
I had very short period when I had money from our angel investor. Before that came to the end, not because of us, because of the situation, and he was not able to pay us checks. And I touched that difference very, very strong. That before, so when I started get checks, I had like normal room. I had some planned budget and I understood, okay, so I have salaries for a few days to pay because I have that money on my bank account. But when happened, no money came and I'm like, okay, hello, Mr. Investor, what do you think? When money will arrive? He said, maybe even a few weeks, just wait. And I was okay, no problem. I tried to figure out with my employees what to do. And then in 2 weeks, money didn't come, but startup income was still very low to cover salaries. And then I understood that he just telling me each week that it will come, but that will not come.
Did it come?
No. In after that room that I was renting in a villa, but there was still a room, I moved to the couch. And then I saw that difference, you know, when you said that there is no, that it is. It's a huge difference after the room, you're having a couch. And there is a huge difference when you cannot pay the full salary and you're starting to explain to your employees, you know, you're working today, very good. And I'm not sure will I pay you next week or not. And then you're celebrating when you earn money, like, oh, you know, you will get your salary.
So without
Congratulations.
a doubt, a big part of the stress that hits entrepreneurs is the salary, their own personal one, and also the payments in order to keep the company going and pay employee salaries, right? That's the big part. And that's the part that, okay, is very understandable and anybody can understand it, right? The part that I find is the one that really is harder to deal with because it goes actually deep into your own psyche and you were saying this early on, is like we all have our own reasons for starting a business, and it's not to make money. Sometimes it's to prove something to ourselves.
No, I wasn't saying, I didn't mean
I know it was
money.
a joke. Yeah.
I literally want just enough to pay the rent or whatever, you know, like survival money.
but you know, obviously that's
I know
a
what you
great.
mean. Yeah.
But it's usually something to prove or to achieve or to prove to ourselves, or something inside us. Or whatever it might be, something we don't even understand. And in my case,
in most cases, it is something that is inside us.
We don't
we all
understand.
want to change something in the way world is right now. I mean, I've spoke to quite a few entrepreneurs, and this is my personal theory. Again, I've tested it in some quite different geographies. Everybody as an entrepreneur wants to change the world in their own capacity.
But even then, let's go back to it. Why do you want to change the world? There's also, it's still down to the same thing. Something is driving you out there, right? And a lot of, at least in my case, I would love to hear, you don't know why you're doing this. You don't really know why you're starting that until a few years later when you're really up against the wall and you're like, oh my God, why am I doing this? And like, this is stressful and it's tough and I'm scared. Half the nights I don't sleep. And thankfully now, usually I can sleep for a number of reasons. But when you're there, that's when you're like, why did I actually start this, right? And I think part of it is that growth that you get.
So there you go. This is the mindfulness, right? So this is where the zooming out. Why have you started this?
And why are you still doing it?
Exactly. Why are you still doing this? Why did you decide to be on this journey? This is what comes into play. And that is where reflection. So reflection can be with a group of friends, discussions like these with people who are actually going through the same journey. So it's quite cathartic when you speak out and you understand that you're not the only one who is going through something like this.
This is important to have a community.
Exactly. So the community, this is what we do.
Crazy important thing. According to my experience and experience of some entrepreneurs, what I saw, when they were not attached to any community, any accelerator or whatever, they're doing that single or like even with a co-founder and some people was around, it much less of more effort, less success. Just you cannot share your feelings. Nobody understands you. When I tried with my friends that left in Russia, they're not entrepreneurs, and like my mindset changed completely during last years. When I'm trying to explain to them what's happening with me, there is so much opportunity, this opportunity, and they're like, so what? And I'm like, how? What do you mean? What do you mean what? And you cannot get that support. I'm saying, I don't have money for food. Can you help me? They said, so what? And like,
they don't relate to this, right? They don't relate to this.
Yeah, they don't care.
They don't relate because they don't understand this.
They don't feel alive.
They don't need to, right?
Yeah.
That's not. I think they're. It's interesting actually because I mean, if you ever, whenever anyone who wanted to start a business, younger, if they ever ask for advice, I'd always tell them, go and work in a company for a couple of years. It's the same thing that they would tell us after you did your undergrad. Go and work for a couple of years and go and do your master's, right? Learn what it's like to work and then go and try the contrast. And same thing with entrepreneurship is sort of understand what it's like to get a paycheck, decide if that's what you want, or because entrepreneurship is fundamentally hard and it's emotionally taxing, it's physically taxing, it's highly unstructured, and it requires a lot of discipline where there are a lot of rule books, but nobody really applies them because, like Darsh said, like some people live on the extremes, right? Some people are looking for balance, and some people are trying to figure out where they need to be to keep a sane, head on their shoulders. But ultimately, you figure I don't know. I mean, I'm 43. I'm on my third business now, and I've worked as an entrepreneur within companies. And if there's one thing that I've taken away from everything is that the only thing that I want to prioritize and like really heavily invest in is how I'm able to sort of isolate my time so that I can actually give the best part of myself, not necessarily to my company, but to my family. Because in the end, companies will rise and fall. You can be a very successful entrepreneur. You can raise tens of millions of dollars in capital. But your back office, as you said it, if you mess that up, then, like my wife has been my life partner for 17 years. We've been married for 16, had a kid very late because we were just living, whatever. Ran a company together. We knew now.
Good.
Are you the founder?
Yeah.
Oh shit! No way, man. We should actually introduce ourselves. We're gonna talk, but but the thing is that it's kind of come full circle for me because I've done things in a very contrarian way, right? Typically, in South Asian culture, folks are having kids right out of their wedding door, right?
Yeah.
And we waited 13, 14 years before having a kid. We moved multiple countries and did a lot of things, and we're fairly accomplished in our respective right. But at the end of it all, I think I'm much more level-headed, more mature about my thought process of what's important to me. And I'll relate to this at a very later time, but I just want to share a very brief thing about building the current startup that we're in. It's been a tough few months for many companies, right? And for us, we've had our own challenges. And I'm very proud of how I've been able to engage myself as a founder with the team, and the outcome of how that's actually resulted in the level of conviction that the team themselves within the company, the founders, the other team members who have pulled us through an inevitable darkness that if we'd accepted it, it would have become that. But we saw that. So by the time that moment, that finite moment of like absolution came, we're like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's what you built in your head rather than what you see. I'm talking like no resources. I'm talking no help. But somehow the universe has this tremendous power that there's this. I was talking to John Mamry about this the other day. Actually, it's about like intentionality, but this other word he used it as well, where you basically determine something, and then it becomes your own reality.
Manifestation. It's like we had manifested that we're not shutting down. That's just not an option, right? Mm-hmm. We're moving on. We're going to be successful.
Okay.
We convinced existing investors to reinvest. We got new money to come in, all that stuff. But in the end, I think that we were able to find that what we need most to make it through this aren't the traditional things that we think we need coming into this.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, right?
Yes,
the same tools don't work the same way.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot about how you configure the use of those tools as you're having to use them in new and innovative ways.
Yeah. I mean, for me, what I actually think of every single day when I wake up is how can we actually add more value to our stakeholders, which includes our employees, which includes everybody in the community. So community plays a big role. And as an entrepreneur, just one of the key fundamentals I actually move with is just adding value in somebody else's ecosystem or life. So that helps us move forward. And value creation is the core genesis of how startups and actually innovation happens. So this is what sort of keeps me going.
A satisfied customer is really motivating.
Actually, more for employees. Employees is actually more motivating than satisfied customers, because customers always have a set of demands. But when you actually see how your employees are learning, growing, not just in a physical way, but actually becoming more responsible and more they are budding, it's really very satisfying.
Taking like more ownership.
Yes,
on what
exactly.
You're doing.
Every time I'm so happy seeing some of my teammates who like grew up or did very amazing thing, and I'm like, wow, I'm so happy. I'm not so happy really when a customer is satisfied.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'm more happy because that person grew up on my eyes, grew up with the whole team, made his own decision, and that decision was satisfying for everyone, and that more valuable because that become one unit that may act by her own and deliver. So that means that you may grow.
Yep.
Otherwise, you investing. Now he's investing.
So how do you have what approach do you use to have your employees take more ownership and be able to take more of their own decisions?
Freedom for me.
Yeah, that's true.
Freedom.
I'm not control them
Just
at all.
complete freedom. We actually adopt a very flat approach. There's no hierarchy in the team. everybody is a decision maker. They have absolute freedom to do what they want to do when they want to do it, and that just we have seen with the right set of employees, it actually brings out the best. Most people fit with it. Some people don't, because some people actually need to have some sort of clarity. But again, this is the entrepreneur journey. It's chaotic. So when the right people come along and there's absolute freedom, this is where we actually we get the best out of them.
And actually, startups cannot afford themselves, specifically if they are small, that people that require control. If you control them, you're not growing, you're controlling. So you have to have those ones that can act by their own and bring that growth to the company, to the teammates, so they motivate each other.
So this is the point, right? I mean, we are all founders. So all of these observations, all of these decisions, all of these actions just go back to you actually having a right set of tools, which includes community, which includes your own internal I would say conscious decision making that will help you move forwards. And even the last thing which I want to add actually is the ability and allowing yourself to make mistakes. This actually for me is one of the greatest tools, because once I realized that it's okay to make mistakes and grow and learn from them, it's perfect. I always say that it's okay to make mistakes, and you're only stupid if you make them twice. So I try to avoid making the same mistake, but at the same time, I'm always making mistakes. I'm always fucking around. So that's the fact.
I want to recommend in that case one amazing book named Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. So that describes how people make decisions and that all of us makes mistakes. So even doors, when you want to open the door and if it opens not pushing but pulling, it's not your mistake if you did something not right. This is mistake of the designer, or because we should expect things around. This is the truth, and that's happening everywhere, and we feel ourselves stupid, but not because we are stupid itself. People do mistakes. That's why we are not robots, and this is the perfection of the human, because we may do mistakes, and in that mistakes find beautiful things that creates arts, amazing decisions.
I think I have a firm theory is that humankind was a mistake itself. And look how beautiful we are evolving to be. So we eventually probably are a mistake ourselves. So why are we not accepting mistakes as individual and as founders? So this is the key aspect, that I'm very free. I'm okay to learn from mistakes and grow. So that's sort of
sometimes important. Mistake in agreement can save your life.
We what's that old saying? If you love it, set it free. If it truly was meant to be, it'll come back to you. There's a very interesting kind of, I guess, anecdotal. So I'm originally from Pakistan, and I think probably in India you guys might do the same. I know in a lot of cultures they do. When people buy a new car, they take a black piece of cloth and they tie it to the back of the car, like to the where you can latch on like a hook if you need to pull it out of like mud or whatever. Take a black cloth and tie it there. It's kind of a way of warding off evil spirits, because we're very superstitious. People believe that if something is brand new and beautiful, somebody will envy it, and that envy will lead to its damage or destruction.
Like the blue eye.
The blue eye in Turkey as well,
thing,
right? But the black cloth is basically, the idea behind the black cloth is funny because it's like a blemish. It's like you have put a blemish on the car so that nobody else can do it, because now it's not perfect. It's not a brand new thing. It's not perfect. That cloth actually represents you taking control of the blemish and applying it yourself so that nobody else has a chance to, because it's like, oh, look how silly or ugly that looks. That's not how they're thinking, but that's the idea behind it.
Remember seeing this documentary Struts on Netflix? It actually says that every pearl has a turd. The pearl is not perfect. You have to accept the pearl with the turd in it. And that's what the point is, that every decision, everything that you do might have a blemish, might have something, but you have to just love the way it is. It's as simple as that.
Or every turd has a pearl in it.
Probably, yes. That's actually another way to look at it. So I think, guys, we just need to wrap up.
So as a closing note, I think ice therapy and saunas. Right?
Psychedelics.
Stretch the head in the sand. Don't forget
by the way,
that.
I was going to say, planning, by the way, is probably a great middle ground. I can talk to you about
Planning,
maybe should we do a quick round of intros? I mean, nobody even knows who we are.
Actually, for me, it's psychedelics. A lot of cryotherapies, shock therapies, actually, as well as community. Building a community with with like-minded founders. That is quite satisfying.
I think that session also that we had was kind of therapy because we shared all our experience of fallings, winnings, and so on. And like, I think after that, we should feel kind of relaxed.
Okay, guys, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good, yeah.
Good way to over any conversation. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thanks for coming.